The sharp October wind cut through the streets of Ashford like a warning. Lucas Brennan stood frozen on the sidewalk, the key still warm from his pocket but useless now. In front of him, the storefront he had poured 12 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into, looked completely different. The old hand-carved sign, Brennan and Hale Timepieces, the one he and Marcus had hung together with laughter and cheap beer all those years ago, was gone. In its place hung a cold, modern blackboard with sharp white letters that read, Hale Precision Watches. New silver locks gleamed mockingly on the heavy oak door. A single sheet of paper, official and cruel, had been taped right at eye level. Lucas's hand shook as he pulled it free. The court order felt heavier than any grandfather clock he had ever lifted. Effective immediately. Exclusive ownership transferred to Marcus Hale. The words blurred. His breath came short and shallow, fogging in the cold morning air. Beside him, Finn shifted from one foot to the other, his small red jacket zipped all the way up to his chin. The boy's eyes were already red-rimmed. "Daddy," Finn's voice cracked, small and frightened. "At school today, they said I'm the son of a thief. They laughed when I walked into class. Even Tommy wouldn't sit with me." A single tear slipped down Finn's cheek. He wiped it away quickly with his sleeve, the same nervous habit he had since he was 5. Lucas knelt slowly, his knees cracking against the cold pavement. He placed both hands on his son's shoulders, trying to steady them, trying to steady himself. "Finn, look at me." The boy lifted his gaze, those wide hazel eyes full of confusion and hurt that no 9-year-old should ever carry. "I didn't steal anything," Lucas said, his voice low and rough. "I swear to you, buddy, this isn't right." But even as the words left his mouth, a deeper dread settled in his chest. Because the man who had done this, the man who had changed the locks, taken the shop, and left his best friend and godson standing outside like strangers, was Marcus Hale. Marcus. The same Marcus who had been there the night Lucas's wife walked out, the same Marcus who had helped him raise Finn when he was drowning in grief and single parenthood, the same Marcus he had called brother for over 15 years. How could the person you trust most in the world wake up one morning and decide to burn your entire life to the ground? Lucas rose slowly, still holding Finn's hand. The boy's fingers felt ice cold in his grip. He stared through the dark windows of the shop. Inside, he could just make out the faint shapes of the clocks, the tall grandfather clocks, the delicate pocket watches, the wall clocks they had restored together, all of them silent now. It was as if every tick, every tock, every heartbeat of the life he had built had simply stopped. The wind picked up again, scattering dry leaves across the sidewalk like forgotten memories. Lucas swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Come on, Finn," he whispered. "Let's go home." But as they turned away, Finn looked back one last time at the store that used to feel like their second home. "Daddy, is Uncle Marcus mad at us?" Lucas didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in that freezing October morning, standing outside the only future he had ever planned, Lucas Brennan realized the clocks hadn't just stopped. They had been deliberately silenced by the one man he had loved like family. And the worst part was, he still had no idea why. This story isn't only about a stolen business or a broken friendship. It's about what happens when the person closest to you betrays you in the cruelest way possible, and how finding the strength to stand back up for yourself and for your child might teach us all something deep about trust, pain, and the quiet power of starting over. Lucas tightened his grip on Finn's hand as they walked slowly down the leaf-strewn street. The boy stayed quiet, but every few steps he glanced up at his father, searching for answers neither of them had yet. Behind them, the new sign on the shop caught the weak autumn light and glinted coldly, as if nothing had ever changed, as if 12 years of brotherhood had never existed at all. The days that followed felt like walking through thick fog. Lucas Brennan sat at the small kitchen table in his mother's old house, the one he had grown up in, staring at the stack of unopened mail. The once familiar scent of pine cleaner and old wood now felt suffocating. Finn was upstairs in the tiny bedroom they now shared, the same room Lucas had slept in as a boy. The boy hadn't spoken more than a few words since that cold morning outside the shop. Every night, Lucas would hear him turning restlessly in the narrow bed, whispering questions into the dark that Lucas couldn't answer. The bank account was nearly empty. The court papers arrived 2 days later, thick, official envelopes that made his stomach twist. Marcus had filed documents claiming Lucas had been secretly draining the business funds for years. Forged signatures, false transfers, lies so carefully woven that even people who had known Lucas for decades were starting to look away when he passed them on the street. He lost the shop completely. Every clock inside it now belonged to Marcus Hale. Lucas stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the leaves had turned deep crimson and gold, but the beauty felt mocking. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and closed his eyes. How many nights had he and Marcus stayed late at the shop, laughing over broken watches and shared dreams? How many times had Marcus promised, "We're in this together, brother," till the end? The memory burned. A soft knock at the front door pulled him back. Lucas hesitated, then opened it. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne stood on the porch, her small frame wrapped in a heavy wool coat. In her hands was a covered casserole dish, still warm. She didn't smile. She simply looked at him with those sharp, kind eyes that had seen too many seasons in Ashford. "I brought you boys something to eat," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but gentle. "Finn needs to keep his strength up." Lucas took the dish, his hands trembling slightly. He wanted to thank her, but the words felt stuck. Mrs. Thorne glanced past him into the dim hallway, then leaned in just a little closer. "Lucas, there's something not right about all this," she whispered. "I've known Marcus since he was a boy. This doesn't feel like him. Not the real him." She placed one frail hand on his arm for a brief moment, then turned and walked slowly back down the porch steps without waiting for a reply. Lucas closed the door and leaned against it, the warm dish heavy in his hands. For the first time since that morning, the shock began to crack open, and something darker started to rise beneath it. Anger, quiet, burning anger that he tried to push down every single day. Because the worst part wasn't just losing the shop, it was watching his son slowly disappear inside himself. Finn barely ate, he barely played. At night, when Lucas would check on him, the boy would sometimes ask in a small, shaky voice, "Daddy, if they take me away, where will I go?" Those words cut deeper than any court document. Lucas would sit on the edge of the bed, stroking Finn's hair until the boy finally fell into an uneasy sleep. Then he would return to the kitchen, sit in the dark, and stare at the wall until the early hours. The isolation grew heavier with every passing day. Old customers crossed the street to avoid him. Friends who once brought broken watches to the shop now offered only awkward nods or quick excuses. The town that had once felt like family now felt like a cage of whispers and sideways glances. Lucas felt the weight of it all pressing down on his chest, making it harder to breathe. He was terrified not just of losing the business he had built with his own hands, but of losing the one thing that still gave his life meaning, his son. Every time the phone rang with another lawyer's number or another official notice, his heart would race with a fear so deep it made his hands shake. He kept telling himself to stay strong for Finn, but some nights, after the boy was asleep, Lucas would stand in the backyard under the cold stars, fists clenched at his sides, fighting the urge to scream at the sky. Why? Why would Marcus do this? The betrayal wasn't just about money or the shop anymore. It was about trust, the kind of trust you give only to someone you love like family. And that trust had been shattered so completely that Lucas wasn't sure he would ever feel safe again. He walked back inside, the old wooden floors creaking under his weight, and paused at the bottom of the stairs. Up there, his little boy was sleeping with the weight of the world on his small shoulders. Lucas swallowed hard, the anger and fear twisting together into something heavy and relentless. He didn't know how much more he could take, but for Finn, he would have to find a way. Lucas turned off the kitchen light and slowly climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Somewhere in the quiet house, an old wall clock his mother had kept for decades ticked on steadily. But to Lucas, It sounded less like time passing, and more like a warning of what was still to come. The nights had grown longer and colder in the old house. Lucas Brennan sat at the worn kitchen table under the dim glow of a single hanging bulb, surrounded by scattered papers and faded photographs. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he couldn't stop staring at the documents. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne had quietly slipped under his door 2 days earlier. A soft knock came again tonight. He opened the door to find Mrs. Thorne standing there with a thermos of hot coffee and a determined look in her eyes. "You're not alone in this, Lucas," she said quietly. "I called an old friend. He's waiting for you at the back table of the library tomorrow morning. His name is Warren Klein, Attorney Warren Klein." Lucas remembered him, the retired lawyer who used to bring in his father's old pocket watch every few months for cleaning. A quiet man with sharp eyes and a reputation for never giving up easily. The next morning, Lucas left Finn with Mrs. Thorne and walked through the crisp autumn air to the small-town library. Warren Klein was already there, sitting in a quiet corner with a stack of legal pads. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Show me everything you have," the older man said simply. Over the next hour, with Mrs. Thorne sitting silently beside them like a watchful guardian, Lucas laid out every court paper, every bank statement, every painful detail. Warren's pen moved steadily across the paper. Then he paused, adjusted his glasses, and pulled out a single document from his own folder. "This is the first real crack," he said in a low voice. "Marcus used your name and social security number to take out 3 large loans last year. The signatures, they're not yours. I've seen enough forgeries in my time to know." Lucas felt the air leave his lungs. He stared at the documents, his hands trembling as he traced the fake signature that looked so much like his own. Marcus hadn't just taken the shop. He had carefully, deliberately built a trap around Lucas's entire life, using Lucas's good name to bury him in debt and suspicion. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Lucas leaned back in the wooden chair, his chest tight. Memories flooded in uninvited. Late nights at the shop with Marcus laughing over coffee, the day they signed the partnership papers with proud handshakes, the way Marcus had held newborn Finn in the hospital and promised to always be there. All of it felt poisoned now. "How could he do this?" Lucas whispered, voice cracking. "He was my brother." Warren didn't offer empty comfort. He simply placed a steady hand on Lucas's shoulder for a moment. "We're just getting started," he said. "But this is proof the lie has holes." As they left the library through the back door to avoid curious eyes, a young woman was waiting near the parking lot. Mia Lang. She used to work part-time at the shop on weekends, helping polish watches and greet customers with her bright smile. She was only 22, but her eyes looked older today. "Mr. Brennan," she said nervously, glancing around. I didn't know if I should say anything, but last month I saw Marcus meeting someone behind the old mill. They were arguing. I heard your name mentioned, and something about making sure it looks real." She handed Lucas a small folded note with a date and time scribbled on it. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," Mia added, her voice shaking slightly. "I was scared. Everyone in town, they've been saying things." Lucas looked at the young woman, seeing the fear and honesty in her face. For the first time in weeks, something shifted inside him. A tiny spark of hope, fragile, but real, flickered to life amid the heavy pain. He wasn't just sitting and waiting for the world to finish crushing him anymore. He was starting to push back. That night, after putting Finn to bed, Lucas sat alone in the living room with the documents spread before him. The anger was still there, deeper now, mixed with a sorrow so heavy it made his shoulders ache. But beneath it, a quiet determination had begun to grow. He thought of Finn's frightened eyes, of Mrs. Thorne's quiet kindness, of Mia's hesitant courage, and of Warren Klein's steady voice. For the first time since that terrible morning outside the shop, Lucas Brennan felt something other than despair. He felt the slow, painful shift from victim to someone ready to fight for the truth. Outside, the wind whispered through the bare branches. Somewhere in the distance, a single church bell rang softly into the night. Lucas closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them again with new resolve. The first crack had appeared in Marcus's perfect lie. and he was no longer willing to let it stay hidden. The months had dragged on like winter that refused to end. Lucas Brennan stood in the dim light of the old storage shed behind the shop he once called his own. The air smelled of dust, oil, and forgotten time. Attorney Warren Klein worked quietly beside him, using a small flashlight to examine the rusted metal safe that had been hidden behind stacks of old clock parts. They had been searching for weeks, slow, careful nights after the town had gone to sleep. Warren finally worked the combination, and the heavy door creaked open. Inside lay a worn leather ledger, its pages yellowed and filled with Marcus Hale's tight, familiar handwriting. Lucas's hands shook as he lifted it. The weight felt heavier than any clock he had ever repaired. Page after page revealed the truth. Every forged loan, every dollar Marcus had secretly taken, every false entry made to look like Lucas was the one stealing from their shared business. And then came the reason. Marcus had sunk deep into gambling debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to dangerous people. He needed to sell the shop quickly, quietly, and completely. Destroying Lucas's reputation had been the easiest way to do it. Lucas kept reading, his breath growing shallow. Marcus had spread the rumors himself. He had whispered lies to customers, planted doubts with neighbors, and even prepared fake witness statements for the court to question Lucas's ability to raise Finn. The betrayal cut so deep that Lucas had to lean against the cold metal shelf to keep from falling. This wasn't just greed. This was calculated destruction by the man he had once trusted with his life and his son's future. A soft sound came from the doorway. Finn stood there in his pajamas, having followed his father through the dark yard. The boy's eyes were wide with confusion and fear as he stepped closer. "Daddy, what's that book?" Lucas tried to close the ledger quickly, but it was too late. Finn had already seen his name written across the pages in Marcus's handwriting, along with words no child should ever have to read. Before Lucas could speak, Finn rushed forward and threw his small arms around his father's waist, burying his face in Lucas's shirt. "I don't want to lose you, too," Finn whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose my dad, like I lost Mom." The words hit Lucas harder than anything he had read in that ledger. His knees buckled. He sank slowly to the dusty floor, still holding the book in one hand while the other wrapped tightly around his son. For the first time since that terrible October morning, Lucas Brennan cried. Not quiet tears, not hidden ones. Deep, raw sobs tore from his chest as he held Finn close, rocking gently like he did when the boy was a baby. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne and Mia Lang had followed Finn from the house. They stood silently just outside the shed door, their faces pale in the moonlight. Neither woman moved. They simply witnessed the moment a grown man breaking open in front of the child he loved more than life itself. Lucas pressed his face into Finn's soft hair, breathing in the familiar scent of his son. "I'm so sorry," he whispered between sobs. "I'm so sorry you had to hear any of this." Finn only held on tighter, his small body trembling. Warren Klein stepped back respectfully, giving them space. The old lawyer's eyes were wet, but he said nothing. In that cold, dusty shed, surrounded by the broken pieces of clocks and the weight of betrayal, something inside Lucas finally cracked wide open. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, a fierce, protective fire began to burn. He would not let Marcus take his son from him. He would not let the lies win. Lucas stayed on the floor for a long time, holding Finn until the boy's breathing grew steady again. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne quietly placed a hand on Mia's shoulder, both women sharing a silent understanding. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees, carrying the faint sound of a distant clock tower striking midnight. Lucas slowly stood, still cradling his son in his arms. He looked down at the ledger one last time, then closed it with a soft, final click. The hidden truth had finally been found. And now, the real fight was about to begin. The courtroom was quieter than Lucas expected. He sat beside Attorney Warren Klein, hands folded tightly in his lap as the judge read the final verdict. Marcus Hale stood motionless at the defense table, his face pale and hollow. With the hidden ledger, Mia Lang's testimony, and the quiet statements gathered by Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, the evidence had become overwhelming. Marcus was found guilty of financial fraud and defamation. The sentence came down clearly: several years in prison and full restitution. The shop was returned to Lucas. As they walked out of the courthouse into the pale winter light, Lucas felt no rush of triumph, only a deep, aching exhaustion mixed with something softer: relief. He stood on the steps for a long moment, breathing in the cold air. Finn waited beside him. Small hand slipped into his father's. "You did it, Daddy," the boy whispered. Lucas looked down at his son and managed a tired smile. "We did it together, buddy." Weeks later, the old shop on Main Street looked different. Lucas had not simply reopened it the way it used to be. With help from Mrs. Evelyn Thorne's steady hands and Mia Lang's youthful energy, he transformed the space. The front room now held the familiar rows of clocks, but the back area had become a bright workshop, with small tables and tools sized for children. A hand-painted sign above the door now read, "Brennan Timepieces and Young Makers Workshop." Every Saturday afternoon, children from around Ashford came to learn how to fix watches, listen to the stories behind old clocks, and build simple projects with their own hands. Finn was there almost every day after school, no longer quiet and fearful. His laughter echoed through the shop again as he helped younger kids tighten tiny screws. The confidence slowly returning to his eyes made Lucas's heart feel lighter with each passing week. One cold afternoon, just before the official reopening, Lucas made a difficult decision. He drove to the county prison and sat across from Marcus Hale in a small visiting room. Marcus looked thinner, older. His eyes carried the heavy weight of shame. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Lucas finally broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "I came here to tell you something, Marcus." He paused, searching for the right words. "I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let hate live inside me and poison the life I'm trying to rebuild with my son." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet Lucas's gaze. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I was lost, and I dragged you down with me." Lucas nodded slowly. There was still pain there, deep and real, but it no longer controlled him. He stood up, placed one hand briefly on the glass between them, then turned and walked away without looking back. The next morning was the grand reopening. Sunlight streamed through the freshly cleaned windows as children and townspeople filled the shop. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne sat in her favorite corner chair, smiling proudly. Mia Lang moved gracefully between the displays, helping excited kids choose their first tools. Lucas stood near the workbench, watching it all. Finn tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can you show me how to fix the old one?" He pointed to a beautiful but worn grandfather clock that had been damaged years ago, the very first major piece Lucas and Marcus had restored together. Lucas felt a quiet ache in his chest, but he smiled. "Sure, buddy. Let's do it together." They sat side by side at the large wooden table. Lucas guided Finn's small hands as they carefully cleaned gears, replaced a broken spring, and listened to the soft clicks as the mechanism slowly came back to life. Tick, tock. The sound grew steadier. Finn looked up at his father, eyes shining with quiet pride. "It's working again." Lucas placed his hand gently on his son's shoulder and felt the warmth of the moment settle deep inside him. Time had not erased the pain, but it had begun to heal what could still be saved. As the afternoon light faded into a soft golden glow, Lucas and Finn stood back to watch the old grandfather clock chime for the first time in many months. Its steady rhythm filled the shop slow, patient, and full of hope. Outside, the first hints of spring touched the branches of the trees lining Main Street. Lucas Brennan looked at his son, then at the children laughing around the workshop tables, and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The clocks had finally started again. And so had he. This story isn't just about justice or forgiveness. It's a reminder that even when the person closest to you breaks your trust completely, the love you hold for your family, and the quiet strength to begin again can help you rebuild something even more meaningful than what was lost. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audio-visual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.